The Iran war trend lines right now are deadly, escalatory, and quite possibly alarming. The U.S. launched its 9th consecutive day of aerial assaults on targets within Iran. The tempo has been fierce. Press releases repeatedly describe degrading Iranian missile and drone capabilities, and yet Iran keeps firing. This does not question the capabilities of the U.S. military. It does, however, speak to an Iranian stubbornness that can inflict the worst imaginable damage. Evidence of that came this weekend. A missile strike against a U.S. base in Jordan that killed two U.S. service personnel. A third American died in Iraq as part of an effort to defuse an Iranian drone. 17 Americans have died in this war. President Trump will attend the dignified transfer of these most recent casualties at Dover Air Force Base tomorrow. Trump vowed on social media today that Iran will pay, quote, many times over, unquote, for each American combat death. CBS News has learned that dozens of U.S. military personnel were injured this past week by Iranian missile strikes across the Middle East. The Pentagon says most have returned to service, but only acknowledged these injuries after asked about them by CBS News. Iran launched a missile attack on Bahrain today. It launched 3 more missiles at Jordan. Each was intercepted. Also, an explosive-laden drone was shot down near an air base in Iraq that houses U.S. Special Operations Forces. And the British said a vessel trying to transit the Strait of Hormuz was attacked near the United Arab Emirates. Traffic through the strait, by the way, has practically vanished. Further complicating the future of global energy supplies, an Iranian-backed militia in Yemen called the Houthis today said it would block shipments from the Bab al-Mandeb Strait to punish Saudi Arabia for recent attacks in Yemen. The Bab al-Mandeb was being used as an overland route to ferry oil to the Red Sea so as to avoid the choked-off Strait of Hormuz. Now, this has been a long-running Houthi threat, and it may be materializing with unknown consequences for oil prices and regional animosities. What is clear today is hostilities and points of conflict are increasing in number and geographic breadth, while diplomacy is foundering, edging close to what might be described accurately as failure. We begin tonight with CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata, who joins us from Amman, Jordan. Charlie, what's the latest?
Well, you know, you had a long laundry list there of what's been happening here, and it has only intensified. In fact, I want to update you. You said 9 consecutive nights that U.S. military has been operating. We just learned from Central Command, that's the military in charge of this region, they just started the 10th consecutive night of bombing. You also mentioned dozens of wounded U.S. personnel, almost 100 if you include the entire area, this entire region, and just the past couple of weeks. But we came to Jordan, as you mentioned, the 2 U.S. service members who were killed here, a third is missing in action from that attack at a base here in Jordan. We're used to talking about Bahrain and Kuwait, but Iran has trained its guns on this country. There have been dozens of wounded just here. There have been 4 out of 5 nights Iran has attacked or attempted to attack U.S. facilities here in Jordan. Just yesterday, as you mentioned, Iran tried to fire missiles at Aqaba in the south. They were intercepted. Tonight, wasn't expecting this. We had air raid sirens here in Amman. So that has obviously raised concerns for the Jordanian people who host American forces here. They don't really like to talk about permanent bases. They don't really address the fact that the U.S. military does have a presence here. But Iran certainly knows that they're here, and they have been using precision weapons to attack U.S. facilities, resulting in the deaths of U.S. service members. And that's the first deaths we've seen in months. So that's why we're here, to try to figure out what exactly is going on and why Jordan is now in the crosshairs.
And Charlie, as you try to figure out what's going on, what do we know about how many U.S. personnel are in Jordan, their ability to defend themselves, meaning use interceptors to stop Iranian missiles, and what their overall mission is from Jordan?
Boy, Major, that is a great question. First of all, they don't like talking about numbers, but there are thousands of U.S. forces here, and they have been part of what's called Operation Inherent Resolve, not Operation Epic Fury. They're not in this fight against Iran. They have been here in the fight against ISIS since 2014. Again, not something that Jordan likes to bang a drum about, but they're here. They're here partially because the U.S. service members that were killed were part of a missile defense systems. There are also F-16 fighter jets here that are based here that have been taking part in military operations throughout this region. That has been established for years. So even with the announcement that we got from Central Command about these 2 service members who had been killed, they said that was part of Operation Inherent Resolve, not part of Operation Epic Fury.
Interesting. Charlie D'Agata from Amman, Jordan. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. CBS News national security analyst Aaron MacLean joins me now. He is also host of the School of War podcast. Aaron, you heard Charlie describe that. What's your reaction?
We are seeing, as you say, a number of possible routes to escalation here. If President Trump follows through on his claim over the weekend that Iran will be made to pay, you could see a broadening of the sorts of targets that we're striking in Iran. By the way, we haven't seen that yet. The strikes since those 2 service members were killed have been largely in character with what precedes them. The Iranians also have options. They could do a broader array of targets hitting desalinization plants and energy targets in the region. They've not done that yet. The United States could also expand in its operations in the Strait itself. For example, ground troops on some of these islands. That option remains. None of these things have happened yet. The last couple of days seem more or less in line with the week that has preceded them.
How about this thing that the Houthis are threatening to do to Saudi near the Red Sea?
Just when things weren't complicated enough, here we are. Yeah, so this is the other critical waterway running through this neighborhood. Now, it's slightly less acute because the Bab el-Mandeb, which leads to the Red Sea, which leads to the Suez Canal, ultimately is not make or break because ships can take the long route around Africa if they want. That is costly. That is a problem. And in combination with the de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz that we're looking at right now, if you see increased strikes on shipping in that key waterway, it's only going to have negative effect on prices.
And what Charlie said about the U.S. disposition of forces in Jordan, they're for something else, not necessarily for this theater of operations, though they're in this theater of operations. They're clearly targets, and now there have been casualties.
That's right. And, clearly something has failed here. We have this multi-layered missile defense concept in the U.S. military, as indeed do all militaries. We're able to intercept things from the exo-atmosphere down to very low altitudes, and these different screens are supposed to stop things before they get through, and then there are shelters at the ground level. Clearly, presumably, we can speculate there are a variety of possible reasons. It could be resource reasons. It could be Iranians shifting their tactics in ways that we don't catch. Things are getting through. It's also possible that troops are not getting to shelters in time. Somewhere, somehow, the system failed.
And when the average American hears, as he or she frequently does, representations by the Pentagon that there is relentless degrading of Iranian capabilities, and yet these things keep happening, how are they to try to square those two things?
Well, the administration has been making a lot of claims. You could argue that in certain respects, since the beginning of the conflict, there have been a series of overpromises and underdeliveries. And when you linger over and over again on the destruction done to the Iranian missile capabilities, you sort of leave people with the impression that those capabilities have been reduced to zero. They haven't been reduced to zero. They still have the ability to take shots. The campaign that we're seeing in recent days is really focused on the Strait of Hormuz. That is clearly what our military is focused on. You don't see a lot of rhetoric about that. You don't see a lot of explanation about why it's happening. You don't see a lot of justification of the costs on those grounds, which I think leaves people looking at this and seeing a sort of tit-for-tat, a-strategic exchange and wondering, what's it all for?
What's it all for, and more importantly, where is it all heading?
Yeah.
Aaron MacLean, thank you very much.
Thank you.